Management's very good at establishing accountability. Management's very good at evaluations and forms. Management's very good about establishing process. In the clips that you just saw a few moments ago, I was talking specifically about management and how it gets in the way of leadership. Understand that when I speak of management in my context, I'm talking about the process, the governance, the regulatory compliance, the taxes, the business processes, not people. When we talk about leadership, we're talking about the behaviors and the environment and how we're going to go about doing our business. So I want to be clear at the very start is management is one thing, leadership is another. Both of them are necessary. I'll start by talking about relationships. Within every business, there are three fundamental relationships that we focus on. Now, of course, inside each one of these relationships are more details and more things, and we'll get into those as time goes on. But initially, let's just understand the customer, the product, and me. So in our customer and our product relationship, we have things like expectation. We have things like product use, when I use it, how I use it. These are all relevant questions that a business has that helps it develop its product more effectively. So by understanding the relationship between my customer and my product, I start to think about how exactly this works. When I start to understand the relationship between my customer and me, then I start understanding how we communicate. What types of engagements do we have? Do we have customer appreciation days? What are those? How do they work? Why would my customer want to participate? So that we can ultimately include them into the relationship between me and my product. So since as a business we now understand our primary relationships between the customer, the product, and ourselves, we have to talk about the behaviors. Now, we're not talking behaviorally about individual behaviors. Now, every person coming to the team should agree and focus on the roots and the foundation of this team start with integrity, credibility, accountability, and these are all self-management. This is not someone holding me accountable. This is not someone making me responsible or reprimanding me for the lack of responsibility. Those are all the results of bad decisions and bad behaviors. So fundamentally, you come to the team and you run through an exercise, and we can talk more about that later on when we get into specifically the segment about our relationships inside the team. But for now, let's talk about the behaviors of a business. If we say these are our relationships, to cover again the customer, the product, and myself, we have to move into that next step of how do we behave as a business? Do I foster collaborative spaces? Do I have cubicles in a big cube farm and everybody has an individual role? Some work requires that layer of segmentation. A lot of call centers, for example, you can't have a lot of crosstalk. So there are places where those types of infrastructures work very well. There are other places where those types of infrastructures actually hinder it. So just because the call center may work in cubicles doesn't mean that my creative design room is going to be laid out in squares. Because when you get into creative work and chaotic work and all these different types of roles within the organization, to manifest their behavior, it starts with their environment. So if we look at our environment and say, let's knock the walls halfway down, there's lots of studies and things about how we can improve our workflow. And so the behaviors start with us as credible and us as accountable, and then they move into how do we work? What's our workspace like? What types of opportunities do we play? So within the roles of those relationships, there are individuals who have the power, if you will, over those particular details. For example, an executive can say 20% of the time my people work from home. A manager can say on the other 80% of the time, we're going to have open rooms with stickies all over the wall, or they might say we're going to have cubicles and you will check in and check out based on call center metrics, etc. So depending on the context of your business, the roles will behave differently. So when it comes to the behavior of the business, we want to focus about what type of environment we provide so that our people can do the work that they need to get done. Another important factor in the behavior of the organization is not so much in the individual, but in the construct of the teams. For example, as a leader, I may understand I want specific teams and persistent teams. As a matrix organization, we may have multiple cross-functional teams, and sometimes they have the same people, sometimes they do not. We may have teams that change out people but do the same kind of work, focused on, say, website delivery. We may have another team that is persistent individuals, but they kind of clean up. They're a real powerhouse team. They run around and they affect, bad projects that are going poorly, we'll say, through other projects that are doing very well, and to try and bring that cross-training and that cross-behavior into it. So not only are we understanding our own behaviors, but by understanding everyone else's behaviors, we're able to build stronger teams and a stronger team matrix because the teams have to interact as well. So from a manager's perspective, they need to understand the metrics that they're receiving from these teams, how the information is flowing out of the teams and how it flows back into the teams, and then how do we understand to take advantage of the things that work well, understand the things that don't work well, and then figure out a common balance between those two. So let's talk about communication. There is verbal communication, nonverbal communication. There is email, there's internet, there's video, there's blogging, there's micro-blogging, some of the social media outlets. And these are the way that we communicate when we choose to engage. For example, by understanding the relationship between me and my customer, if I'm a company that leverages social media, then my behaviors need to be more spontaneous. They need to have incentive programs built into them, ultimately leading to my communication where making a Facebook comment may be acceptable. If I were working in aerospace and I had naval messages or government messages coming through and I worked in a lot of highly regulated governance and I wouldn't put something on Facebook, I'm probably not going to get the same kind of response I would as if I were doing something else for a business. Oftentimes we're trying to focus on communication and we're going to communicate better. Well, talking a lot is not necessarily communication. Just like people working in the same room is not necessarily collaboration. But we'll call it that because it's marketable. But on the inside of the business, let's get really honest. We know things aren't working well here and we know things aren't working well there. By going back and understanding our relationships and our behaviors, communication becomes a byproduct of all those variables. So rather than saying, we're going to start using email because it will solve all of our problems, rather than buying some new software tool suite because it's going to solve all of our problems, this silver bullet mentality is what's actually keeping your communication from getting better. So if we were to take those same thoughts and the intentions behind the new software or using email or new procedures, whatever, let's pull those intentions out and let's take them back to our relationships and our behaviors and say, guys, our intention is to communicate more efficiently with our customer, within ourselves, with our business, with our managers, with our stakeholders, with our shareholders, whomever your audience may be, the intention is to communicate better. How can we do that? Now, you may find out at the end of that entire discussion that picking up this collaborative software tool was the right thing to do. But making that decision before you have the input of all these individuals and the relationships and the behaviors of your business, you don't know what you don't know. You're missing and you don't know what you're missing. And these types of things are very important when it comes down to communication. So later on in this series, we will break down each one of these relationships and we'll do a segment to talk about me and my team, me and my product, me and my customer, and we'll break them into smaller segments to take a much deeper dive. And I'll see if I can get some help from other individuals to bring more of a visual to you. We'll also get into the behaviors and the relationships between traditional managers, traditional executives, and traditional employees, and we'll talk more about the empirical process management and the agile management and the mindset of tomorrow's business. So instead of waiting for the economy to come back around where it was, we're going to start learning to do business in the new economy, which means we have to be able to tolerate a much higher rate of change. The last thing we'll get into is communicating effectively. I've got some examples that I'll show you that deal with diverse teams and remote teams that I've personally managed and some of the software tools that we've used to put them in play. And once you get your communication set, then you know it's a result of your relationships and your behaviors, then we'll put them all together into this little ball and we'll call that our business. Now we'll talk about facilitation. And how do I facilitate this new business that we've created while we have continual improvement within each one of these? Because again, none of them are a silver bullet. So I hope that you join us. I hope you enjoy what you've seen so far, and we'll look forward to you in the next segment.